You are holding a bell pepper from the store right now, or one just like it, and you press your thumb against the wall of it, and it gives way like wet paper. Thin, hollow, 3 bites, and it's gone. Now hear me. The peppers we grew back home had walls thick as your finger, heavy in the hand. You could stand one on the counter and it wouldn't tip. Sweet all the way through. And we never bought a single thing to make it happen. That's the part they don't want sitting in your head. Because there is a whole shelf at the garden store, bright bags with pictures of fat peppers on them, and every one of them is selling you back something the good Lord already put in your own kitchen for free. They have no reason to tell you that. There's no money in it for them. I was raised plain in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. No electricity in the house, no shortcuts, no running to town for a fix. What we knew about growing food was handed down, father to son, the way my grandfather handed it to me on his knees in the dirt behind the barn. Stay with me, because right around the middle of this, I'm going to show you the one thing my grandfather dropped into every single planting hole, something that costs less than a penny, that thickens a pepper wall more than any bag you can buy. But first, do me a small favor. Tell me down in the comments what state you're growing in, or your growing zone. If you know it, just drop it there. Peppers behave different in Georgia heat than they do in a short Pennsylvania summer, and I want to speak to where you actually are, because here is what took me years to understand. A thin-walled pepper is not bad luck. It is not a bad seed. It is a plant that was starving for something specific, and nobody ever told you what. Let me start with the thing that fails most gardens before the plant even flowers. You put your little pepper transplant in the ground, it looks healthy, green, upright, proud, and for a few weeks it does fine. Then the first peppers start to set, and you notice a sunken brown patch on the bottom of the fruit, leathery and dark, like the pepper is rotting from the blossom end up. Most folks think that's a disease. They think they did something wrong with water, or they run to town and buy a fungus spray. They spray and it keeps happening, and they never fix it, because it was never a fungus at all. That brown rot is the plant screaming for calcium. Here's what's actually going on, and it's simple enough that a child can understand it once somebody bothers to explain it. A pepper builds its walls out of cells, millions of little boxes stacked together, and the glue that holds those cell walls firm, that keeps them stiff and thick instead of soft and collapsing, is calcium. Without enough calcium moving into the fruit, the cell walls can't hold their shape. The bottom of the pepper caves in, and even the peppers that don't rot outright come out thin because the walls were built weak from the inside. Now, the garden industry knows this. They sell you a little bottle of calcium spray for $9 or $10 and tell you to mist your plants, and it does a little something. But my grandfather never owned a bottle of anything. He saved eggshells. Every shell from every egg, all winter long, went into a tin by the stove. He'd let them dry, and he'd crush them fine as he could between his hands, almost to a powder. When we set out the pepper plants in May, a good handful of crushed shell went in the bottom of every hole, mixed into the loose dirt where the roots would grow down into it. Now, I'll tell you the truth, because I won't sell you a fairy tale. Eggshell is nearly pure calcium carbonate, but it breaks down slow. Whole shells you toss on top do almost nothing the first year. The secret my grandfather knew by feel, and that the universities only measured later, is that you have to crush it fine, and you have to put it down low where the moisture and the soil acids can work on it all season long. Fine powder against damp soil starts releasing calcium in weeks, not years. Cornell's extension people have written plainly that blossom end rot in peppers and tomatoes is a calcium problem, not a disease, and that steady calcium in the root zone is what stops it. That's the outside world catching up to what was sitting in my grandmother's stove tin the whole time. But here's the part that matters even more, and here's where most people still go wrong even after they add calcium. The calcium can be sitting right there in the soil and the plant still can't get it, because calcium doesn't move on its own. It rides into the plant on water, pulled up through the roots. If your watering is feast and famine, bone dry for 4 days, then a flood, the calcium can't get carried up steady, and the fruit starves even in rich soil. That's why folks add calcium and still get the brown rot. They fixed one thing and missed the other. So the eggshell only works when the water is steady. And that leads me straight to the next thing nobody tells you, because steady water is where the real thickness is won or lost. If this way of thinking, feeding the plant what it truly needs from what you already have, without paying an industry to hand it back to you, if that sits right with you, I want to tell you about something I put together. It's called the Garden Blueprint. and alongside it, the harvest blueprint, both collected together in the Complete Garden Field Edition. These are my written down guides, the old Amish soil and storage knowledge, the penny cost pest cures, the handed down methods that took generations to learn and cost nearly nothing to use. You can find them linked in the description below for $97, and everything in them follows the same plain principle you're hearing right now. Use what you have, waste nothing, and grow food the way it was always meant to be grown. Now, back to where we were, because calcium can be sitting right there in the soil and the plant still can't get it. Think about how a pepper fills out. Late in the season, those walls plump up, they get heavy, they get sweet. That's the plant pumping sugar and water into every cell, swelling the walls thick. If the plant is stressed, gasping between waterings, it can't do that. It goes into survival mode. It protects its seeds and lets the walls stay thin. A stressed pepper is a thin pepper, every time. Back home, we didn't have a hose we could turn on whenever we felt like it. Water was work. You hauled it or you managed the ground so it held what the rain gave. So we mulched heavy, straw, chopped leaves, whatever we had piled thick around the base of every pepper plant, 4 fingers deep. That mulch did 2 things at once. It kept the soil from baking dry in the afternoon sun, so the water stayed even for days instead of hours. And it kept the ground temperature steady because pepper roots hate a hot, dry crust over them. The English pay for drip lines and timers and moisture meters, and those are fine things. I won't knock a man for using them, but a bale of straw does the same job for a couple of dollars, and it feeds the soil as it rots down. My father used to say the mulch was working for you even while you slept, and he was right. Here's a number worth holding on to. University trials on peppers have found that plants kept at steady, even soil moisture can produce fruit with noticeably thicker walls and far less blossom and rot than plants swinging between wet and dry, sometimes cutting that rot from ruining a third of the crop down to almost none, a third of your peppers gone or saved on water alone. So think about what we've got so far. Calcium in the hole, down low, crushed fine. Steady water held by mulch on top. Already you're ahead of most every backyard grower in your county, and you haven't spent more than a couple dollars. But calcium builds the frame of the wall. It doesn't make it thick and sweet on its own. For that, the plant needs one more thing. And this is the one the whole industry has managed to hide behind a fancy word. That word is potassium. Now stay with me here, because this is the one my grandfather dropped in every hole, the penny thing I promised you. Potassium is the mineral that runs the plumbing of the plant. If calcium is the glue in the wall, potassium is the pump that pushes sugar and water into the fruit and swells it out. It's the difference between a pepper with a wall like cardboard and a pepper with a wall like an apple. Every commercial grower knows peppers are heavy feeders of potassium late in the season when the fruit is filling. It's not a secret to them at all. It's only a secret to you. And what do they sell you? A bag marked with 3 numbers, and they charge you extra for the one on the end, the potassium number, and they dress it up with words like bloom booster and fruit enhancer, and they put a fat red pepper on the front, and they want $15, $20 for it. My grandfather got the same thing out of the wood stove, wood ash, plain gray ash from burning hardwood. It is one of the richest, cheapest sources of potassium a man can get his hands on, and it also carries calcium and other minerals besides. When we cleaned out the stove, that ash didn't get thrown away. A small handful went into the pepper bed, worked into the soil before planting, and a light scattering went alongside the plants later in summer when the fruit was setting. Now, I have to be careful and honest with you because wood ash is strong, and this is exactly the kind of detail the bag product people never bother teaching you because they'd rather you stay dependent. Wood ash raises the soil's pH, makes it more sweet, less sour. Peppers like their soil just slightly on the sour side, right around 6 to 6.5, so you use ash with a light hand. A handful per plant worked into a wide area, not a pile against the stem. If your soil is already sweet, if you're out west with chalky alkaline ground, you go very easy or skip it and reach for something else with potassium instead. And here's the thing that isn't ash but does the very same work, and every one of you has it in your kitchen right now: banana peels. A banana peel is loaded with potassium. Back home, we didn't have many bananas. They weren't a plain farm thing, but I learned this one from the English neighbors years later, and it fits the old way perfectly, so I pass it along. You take your peels, chop them up, and either dig them into the soil near the roots or dry them and grind them and scatter the powder. As they break down, they hand that potassium right to the roots, free, from something you were about to throw in the trash. You see the pattern now, don't you? Calcium from the eggshell you throw away, potassium from the ash you shovel out, and the peels you toss. The whole time, the makings of a thick-walled pepper were going into your garbage can while you drove to town to buy them back in a bag. Oregon State's Extension has written plainly that wood ash is a legitimate source of potassium and lime for the garden, and that a moderate amount worked into the soil supplies nutrients that would otherwise cost real money. That's a land-grant university in print telling you the woodstove does the work of the fertilizer bag. My grandfather just never needed a university to tell him. So now the plant has its glue and its pump. But there's a third mineral, a quiet one, and skipping it is why some of you have deep green leaves but pale, weak fruit. That mineral is magnesium. Magnesium sits at the very center of chlorophyll, the green in the leaf. It's the engine of the whole factory. Without enough of it, the leaves start to yellow between the veins staying green like a leaf skeleton. And a plant that can't make green can't make sugar, and a plant that can't make sugar can't fill a thick, sweet wall. It all runs together. And here the English have a famous cheap fix, one you've surely heard of: Epsom salt, plain magnesium sulfate from the drugstore, a couple dollars for a big box. Now, I'm going to tell you something the internet gets wrong, and I want you to trust me because I'm not selling you anything. Epsom salt is not a miracle. It will not fix a plant that has plenty of magnesium already. Dumping it everywhere does nothing but waste it. But if your soil is truly short on magnesium, and many sandy soils and heavily gardened old beds are, then a spoonful of Epsom salt dissolved in a gallon of water, poured at the roots once when the plant starts flowering, greens it right up, and gets the sugar factory running again. The trick, and this is the plain living way, is you don't guess and you don't overdo. You watch the plant yellowing between the veins on the lower leaves. That's your sign. No yellowing, you don't need it. That's the difference between the way we were raised and the way things are sold now. We fed the plant what it asked for, when it asked. We didn't buy a treatment for a problem we didn't have. Now, let me stop and speak to some of you directly, because I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, this is fine for a man starting a fresh garden in the spring, digging handfuls into empty holes. But my peppers are already in the ground. They've been in for weeks. The bed's established. Some of you have raised beds you set up years ago, good soil you've built up season after season, and you're wondering if any of this can still help you this year, right now, today. It can, and I won't make you wait for it. If your plants are already in and growing, you can't easily get calcium and ash down into the root zone the way you would at planting. But you can side dress, which is just a fancy word for feeding, alongside a plant that's already there. Here's exactly how, and you can do it this weekend with nothing you don't already own. Take your crushed eggshell, as fine as you can get it, and your small handful of wood ash if your soil isn't already sweet. Scratch a shallow ring in the soil around each plant, about 6 inches out from the stem, just an inch deep so you don't tear the roots. Sprinkle your calcium and potassium into that ring. Cover it back over with the loose soil. Then water it in well and pile your mulch back on top. That shallow ring puts the minerals right where the feeder roots are reaching, and every time you water, a little gets carried down to them. Within a couple of weeks, the peppers that are still forming will start building thicker with what you just gave them. You didn't have to tear anything out. You didn't have to start over. You fed what you already have. And if you've got that magnesium yellowing on the lower leaves, that's when the Epsom salt water does the most good, because a growing plant with fruit setting is hungriest for it. 1 spoonful per gallon poured at the base once. Then watch. There's one more thing for you established bed folks, and it costs nothing at all. Go look at the mulch you laid down back in spring. I'll wager it's thinned out, broken down, gone patchy. Peppers set their heaviest, thickest fruit in the back half of summer, in the worst of the heat, and that is exactly when a thin mulch lets the soil swing dry and hot and stresses the plant right when it's trying to fill those walls. Refresh it. Another few inches of straw or chopped leaf. Right now, 4 fingers deep. It's the cheapest, simplest thing you can do this weekend, and it protects everything else you've done. So whether you're planting fresh or working an old bed, you're covered. But I've been holding something back, because everything I've told you so far is about feeding the plant. And feeding is most of it. But there is one more thing. and it has nothing to do with what you add to the soil, and it is the single, strangest, most powerful trick my grandfather ever taught me, and almost nobody outside the old ways does it because it feels wrong when you do it. It feels like you're hurting the plant. Let me tell you where I first saw it. I was maybe 9 years old, out in the garden behind our farmhouse, following my grandfather down the pepper row on a warm June morning. The plants were young, knee-high, and each one had put out its first little flower right down low where the main stem forks, the very first bloom the plant makes. I was proud of those flowers. I thought they meant peppers coming, and my grandfather reached down and pinched every single one of them off, snapped them right off between his thumbnail and finger, and dropped them in the dirt. I about cried. I asked him why he was killing our peppers. And he looked at me and he said, "We're not killing them, we're teaching the plant to wait." Here's what he understood, and it is real. And the growers who sell you plants will never tell you, because a plant covered in early flowers looks like it's worth buying. That first flower, the one that forms down in the crook of the stem, is called the king flower, or the crown bud. If you let it set and turn into a pepper, the plant is still young and small, and it pours everything it has into ripening that one early fruit. It stops growing bigger, it stops putting out new branches and new roots. The whole plant stalls, small and weak, all its strength poured into that single early pepper. And that early pepper, forced out of a tiny plant, comes out small and thin-walled itself. You lose twice. But if you pinch that first flower off while the plant is still young, you take the brakes off, the plant has no fruit to feed, so it does what a young plant is supposed to do. It grows, it gets bushy and broad. It drives its roots down deep and wide. It builds itself into a big, strong frame, and only then, when it's large and powerful, does it start setting fruit in earnest, on branches strong enough to hold and fill them. And a big, strong plant fills its peppers thick, every one of them. Not one early runt, but a whole plant covered in heavy, thick-walled fruit later in the summer, because you spent those first few weeks building the factory instead of forcing out one weak early product. You pinch that first crown flower, and any of the very earliest few that come with it while the plant is still small, up to about the point where it's got a good sturdy frame and plenty of leaf. After that, you leave them be and let them set. Now, I want to be square with you, because I promised I'd give you real research and not just old stories, even when the story is my own. This one has been studied. Trials on bell peppers have found that removing those earliest flowers and letting the plant build up first can increase the total marketable yield and the size of the fruit that follows, because the plant establishes a bigger frame before it commits to filling fruit. Growers who supply the fresh market have quietly used flower and early fruit pruning for years to get bigger, better peppers. It's in the horticulture literature. It is not folklore. It's just that folklore knew it first, out behind a Pennsylvania barn, 3 generations before anyone measured it. Think about that for a moment. The most powerful thing you can do for a thick-walled pepper costs nothing, requires nothing. You don't buy it, you don't spray it, you don't dig it in. You just pinch off a flower with your fingers and have the patience to wait. And that right there is exactly why you were never told. There is no bag to sell for it. There is no bottle. A man can't put patience on a shelf and charge you $20 for it. That's the whole game when you stand back and look at it. Everything that actually makes a great pepper is either free or nearly so. Calcium from your eggshells, potassium from your ashes and your banana peels, magnesium from a $2 box you barely need to touch, steady water from a bale of straw, and the biggest secret of all, a pinch and a little patience. Not one of those things has a good profit in it. So an entire industry grew up around selling you around them. Bottles and bags and boosters and sprays, aisle after aisle, all of it circling the simple truth like buzzards, because the simple truth was never something they could ring up at the register. Let me pull it all together for you, so you've got it clean and can walk out to the garden and do it. When you plant, crush your dried eggshells fine and put a good handful in the bottom of the hole, down where the roots will find it, for the calcium that builds the wall. Work a small handful of wood ash into the soil for potassium, unless your ground is already sweet and alkaline, and if it is, lean on chopped banana peels near the roots instead. Set your plant and mulch it heavy, 4 fingers deep, straw or leaves, to hold the water even, because calcium only rides into the fruit on steady moisture, and a thin-walled pepper is almost always a thirsty, stressed one. While the plant is young and small, pinch off that first king flower down in the crook of the stem and the earliest few after it, and let the plant grow big and strong before it sets fruit for real. Then, as summer comes on and the fruit starts filling, side dress a little more ash or peel for potassium, because that's the mineral that pumps the walls thick and sweet in the back half of the season. And if you see yellowing between the veins on the lower leaves, and only if you see it, give 1 dose of Epsom salt water, a spoonful to the gallon, at the base. Watch your mulch and keep it thick right through the hottest weeks, because that's when the peppers plump their walls and that's when stress does the most damage. Do that and you'll pick peppers you can stand on the counter. Heavy in the hand, walls thick as your finger, sweet clear through, the kind we grew every year on ground my family worked for generations, without ever once walking down a garden store aisle. Here's what I want you to carry away from this, more than any single trick. You were made to feel like a good garden was something you had to buy your way into. Bag after bag, bottle after bottle, a little more money every spring, and a quiet worry in the back of your mind that you still weren't doing it right, that there was some product you'd missed. That worry was sold to you on purpose. It was never true. The plain people never lost this knowledge because we never had the money to be talked out of it. We kept saving the eggshells and shoveling the ash and pinching the flowers while the rest of the world forgot, and now you've got it back. Nobody can sell it to you again, because now you know it was yours the whole time. That's who you are if you've watched this far. You're not a customer for the fertilizer aisle. You're the kind of person who'd rather use what the good Lord already put in your own kitchen and your own wood stove than pay a company to sell it back to you in a fancy bag. That's not being cheap. That's being wise. That's stewardship, not wasting what you've been given, and it's the way my people have lived for a very long time. So do me that favor I asked at the start. Tell me down in the comments what state you're growing in, or your zone if you know it, so I know who I'm talking to and can speak to your weather and your soil. And now tell me one thing more while you're down there. Tell me, have you ever gotten blossom end rot, that brown sunken bottom, and thought it was a disease all these years? I want to know how many of you were never told the truth about it. Go on and leave that comment. It matters to me, and it helps me know what to explain next. And if this is the kind of thing you want more of, the plain, cheap, handed-down ways of doing what the world overcharges for, then come join us. Don't think of it as following a channel. Think of it as sitting in on the knowledge the old folks were afraid would die out, being written back down where regular people can find it again. Because next time, I'm going to show you the one mistake nearly everybody makes when they pick their peppers, the wrong way to pull them off the plant that quietly cuts your harvest in half and shortens the whole season, and the simple change my grandfather made with a small pair of shears that kept our plants producing thick, heavy peppers weeks longer than the neighbors. It's so small you'd never guess it mattered. But it's the difference between a plant that gives up in August and one that keeps feeding you clear into fall. Save your eggshells, save your ash, and I'll see you in the next one. I'm Eli. If you're still here with me, come one step closer. Inside the Amish field circle, I pick up right where I left off, walking you through the crushed eggshell planting method, hole by hole. Ask me your own question, and a real person, me, answers you myself. Growers who love the old ways already belong here. Just point your phone's camera at the code on screen, and you can cancel anytime, one click, no risk. If this helped you grow better peppers, why not subscribe and stay with me here? I have plenty more simple gardening tips waiting for you, all made to make your garden easier.